Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Not in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard. There's a lot of things that can tear you apart. I know the roads sometimes feel lonely, but remember you're not the one and only. There's always someone there to help you, a helping hand to pull you through. There's only one thing you should do. Take my hand and join the Love and Life crew. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you.
Goeienaand! Good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. We are very fortunate to have a senior member of Afriforum joining us. Ian Cameron was appointed as the head of community safety at Afriforum in 2013. His main responsibility is the development of Afriforum's community safety division to becoming the leading community crime fighting entity in South Africa, and managing the Afriforum Trauma Victim Support Unit. Ian manages Afriforum 911, which provides an emergency service to more than 42,000 members, including administration and application support. Ian is the chairperson of the Solidarity Movement Safety Committee, that includes 18 organizations, as well as the Afriforum Safety Committee. He is a security advisor on current and contemporary issues for different institutions within the movement and elsewhere. The discussion tonight is very timely because the elephant in the room is South Africa becoming a police state? Let me show you a little video just to whet your appetite on what we're talking about. Okay, I think you can see the picture. We'll get the picture of what's going on there. Now, tonight Ian sent me some photos taken by a family who have been forced into quarantine in Groblersdal, northeast of Pretoria. The government has not even tested them. Let me show you these photos, and as I say, we will be discussing these later. This is their dinner that they were given. You can see it's chicken, putu, and just a tiny side of mixed veggies. And that's the kind of conditions that they're living in under quarantine. That's one of the houses in the quarantine center. And probably most shocking of all is the toilet that they have to use. Now, what Ian says is that it is really bad. Tap water is even undrinkable. And they only get one bottle for the whole family per day. Right, now, let me get Ian online so we can get the show on the road. Give me a second, guys. Okay. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Scott.
Good to have you on.
Good, thank you.
Fantastic. Could you do me a favor and just move your camera down just a smidgen?
There you go. Is that all right?
Much better. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Now, Ian, to kick off the show, we've got a couple of hundred people. Well, let me just have a look and see how many people we've got watching right now. We've got about 250 people watching right now, so it'll grow up to probably about 500 later. What I'd like to start off with is a bit of your background, where you grew up in South Africa, how you've seen things change in South Africa and so on. If you just want to give us a little bit of your background on that basis.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. I was born in Gauteng, in the East Rand, and I grew up there until about the age of 10 when we actually moved to Great Britain for almost 6 years. Upon returning, went back to finish school in South Africa, close to Pretoria, and after which I then went to study at the University of Pretoria. I didn't do much studying, as there were a lot of extracurricular activities to get to, and shortly after that I started getting involved with student politics and also with Afriforum, and I guess the crime situation in South Africa slowly led me into the job where I am today, and in which I studied and specialized over the years, and also on the side did a bit of nature conservation work. I actually worked in the Pilanesberg National Park for a while, and then returned to Afriforum again. So I've been with Afriforum now for almost 10 years.
Right.
I think it's 2 or 3 months, and then I would have been with them for 10 years.
Right. Now, what exactly does your role at Afriforum entail? What is your role?
There are quite a few things that my team takes responsibility for. From my side, I think a big focus is the establishment of community safety structures in the country, and they've done a remarkable job with this. We started with this probably about 5 years ago, and today we have just over 150 community safety structures in South Africa, and this includes about 12,000 people that are trained in some way to perform community safety duties, whether it is to contain a crime scene and to make sure that it's not contaminated before the necessary forensic experts get there, or whether it is to safeguard an accident scene after it has happened, how to react to crime, how to assist people on the scene. All of those different aspects are the things that we look at. And then we've also taken it a little bit further, where we've actually developed insurance policies, not as Afriforum itself, but with external organizations, to people who are involved in neighborhood watch or farm watch activities. We've got a 24/7 control center that has contact not only with the police but with several other security institutions in the country. And we work hand in hand to try and safeguard the people in the communities in which we live. And thus far, we've had reasonable success. It's grown quite fast, and it poses a bit of a challenge to make sure that you keep up with all the maintenance that you have to do to get people to be trained and so on.
Right.
I think it's very important to emphasize that we can't be seen as a vigilante group or as someone that's trying to take the law into their own hands. That's why we have a very strong code of conduct, and we make sure that everything we do is to the letter when it comes to legislation or existing legislation. And I think it's also changing the perception that we can't do anything. I think there's so many positive things that we can do when it comes to combating crime in South Africa as civilians. And I think people need to take up that space, and that's what Afriforum has been doing. So those are amongst other things. I think the one important part to mention is also our trauma unit that focus on the support of farm attack victims in most cases, and then also other violent crime victims, people that are really struggling to get through what they've experienced. And then also, we've had a real increase in child cases when it comes to molestation or those types of challenges like sexual assault, where people have approached us to say, but are there ways that you can assist in covering costs for counseling for these children? So we also look at that. And then I think lastly, also with the trauma unit, is the cleaning of crime scenes. I mean, and it's not necessary to go into detail about it now. I think it's horrific. But when we look at farm attacks, for example, the crime scenes are quite gruesome in many cases. And we then make sure that when people come back home or when they arrive back home, they walk into a clean house and it must feel as good as new. So we try to assist people in those ways. I think that's a general overview. And then just to take it all together with the support when it comes to victim support on the one side, when it comes to the trauma unit, and then also the establishment of community safety structures, we've got Afriforum 911, which is an app that's being used by 42,000 people in the country. They can use it for any form of emergency to dispatch emergency services. We then facilitate the entire emergency for them. And with that, with our community safety structures and along with Afriforum 911, we've got a national radio communication system that all of our community safety structures can speak with each other and different law enforcement and emergency organizations in the country.
Right. Now, I've got a couple of people here saying that there seems to be a little bit of an echo. What I'm going to just ask other people if they're finding the audio to be fine, and if a lot of you are getting the echo, we'll work on that in a second. Okay, now, you talked about farm attacks as part of your role. Now, I follow all those messages you send out with farm attacks that happened around South Africa, and I've got to compliment you. You do a fantastic job with that. What is your analysis of farm attacks and farm murders? In other words, what trend are you seeing in the last couple of years?
I think there are quite a few important points to discuss with regards to farm attacks in the country. We've definitely seen a changing trend over the last few years. Just before we started speaking tonight, I was actually looking through some of the data just for interest's sake.
Right.
And something that has definitely changed in the last 2 years is a reasonably drastic increase. I wouldn't say drastic, but a reasonable increase in the attacks on farm workers, for example, where a lot of cruel things are done to them as well. And previously, we wouldn't really have seen that so often. Whereas now we see that far more often than what we did before. The other thing that we also see is that more people are surviving attacks. So even though attacks are increasing quite a lot every year for the past 3 years, we see that murders are stabilizing. Now, it would be wrong to say that we're better off because we're still losing a lot of people. But it's a good thing to see that more people are surviving. This means that people are fighting back and that they're starting to win the fight and that they're coming out alive on the other end. And it sends out a very important message that, first of all, people aren't afraid to defend themselves and they're not afraid to fight back. And it also sends out a message, I think, to certain complacent parts in government that haven't done enough to assist people in the fight against farm attacks, and that is that people aren't going to wait for government to fight this fight for them. They are going to jump in, and they're going to start doing something within the framework of the relevant legislation to make sure that they can defend themselves and their families. And it's quite simple. From the Afriforum side, we feel strongly about the fact that you need to be able to defend yourself. And when two neighbors can defend themselves, they can defend each other. And when neighbors start defending each other, they start defending a community. And this kind of circles out to a point where you've really got safe areas where people look after each other. And it's quite a simple structure. It just demands community involvement, and that's a little bit of a challenge in certain areas. When it comes to attacks this year, Scott, just to give you a short overview, it's important to say that the lockdown has had quite a remarkable impact on farm attacks. So even though we've seen a drastic increase in something like stock theft in certain provinces, especially a place like, or parts of Limpopo, the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal, we've seen a reasonable decrease in farm attacks compared to the previous year. So we've only had 11 farm attacks in April this year, whereas last year we had far over 25, even 30 attacks in the same time period, and we've only had one murder in April. It's still one murder too many. The point is just that the decrease is very visible, and obviously we want it to stay that way. Unfortunately, we know that the implications of the lockdown is, are in many cases negative. In this case, it's positive, but the challenge that we're facing, and I'm sure we're going to speak about that later, is that more people are going to go hungry, and the pressure on the farming community will surely rise, and therefore, in many cases, unfortunately, it might cause for danger in their immediate vicinities to also increase.
Right. Now, you talked about how the farmers have got these like little commandos that go and patrol the area. My understanding is that Becky Sele in the last week has banned Neighborhood Watch, and more disturbing, the farm protection commandos under the lockdown. Is that correct? And if so, what is his motivation here?
Yeah, so just to give some clarity, I know you and I are on the same page, but just to make sure people understand that the commandos were actually disbanded in the early 2000s, and we were told that there would be a replacement for them. One of the things promised by the then National Police Commissioner, Jackie Selebi, was that the reservist system would be pushed in a way that it could kind of take the place of the commandos, and that they had a plan. And if you go and speak to people like Dr. Johan Burger, who is now with the Institute for Security Studies, it's very clear that the police didn't have a plan at that stage, and that very senior police officials like Dr. Burger themselves didn't know about this plan. So it's important to give that context. And since then, we haven't seen any form of replacement come forward. In fact, it's decreased. So where, in around 2010, South Africa had over 60,000 reservist police officers or officials, they now have less than 6,000 left. And wow. It's not even 10 years later. Now, why am I saying this before I speak about Becky Cele? When you look at the probably around 2009 to about 2012, that was the Soccer World Cup in South Africa, a lot of excitement for the country. Becky Cele was actually the national commissioner then. And the very interesting part is, if you go look at the internal audit reports of the police, of the South African Police Service at that stage, it is quite clear that the damage that he did at that time was quite remarkable. So usually you would get 2 remedials if you were to fail your exam at the police college. Becky Cele actually forced people through after failing 4 times. So we ended up with a lot of officials who received uniforms and were wearing the blue uniform without actually having passed their tests and exams properly, just for the South African government to say that we have enough police officials for the Soccer World Cup. I'm not even going to mention all the other issues when it comes to, for example, firearm competency. When you looked at the Eastern Cape, more than 50% of police officers weren't competent to handle a firearm at that stage. So the list goes on. So now, it's 10 years later. We've been through the stage where we had General Ria Piecha as the National Commissioner. She was also not a career police official as Bekitele. He was also not one. And we've gone through this time where we actually had a bit of false hope, where we had General Komotso Paghlane come in. He was a fantastic community involvement national commissioner. He really believed in pulling in the community. And then once again, it came out that he was also corrupt, and he was removed from his position. Now we've got a General Sithole who is absolutely silent. We haven't really seen much from him. And just before Minister Bekitele became the Minister of Police recently, we had Fikile Mbalula, who was the then Minister of Police. And at that time, they actually changed a few regulations when it came to the power that a police minister would have with the South African Police Service. And the then minister actually became far more of a direct manager in the police than what he or she would have previously been.
Right.
This means that Fikile Mbalula and now Bekitele has a lot more power in the police. We don't see the National Commissioner speaking in the way that you would have seen in previous years. We mostly hear from the Minister of Police now instead of hearing from the National Commissioner. And this is very worrying, because this means that there's far more room for political influence in the police, and we obviously have already had a serious increase in that over the years. And now we come to the lockdown, where Bekitele announced that no farm watchers or neighborhood watchers could patrol. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the ground level police stations, officers, whether it's specialized units or elsewhere, have said, but we don't want this. We need community safety structures to assist us, because we don't have the resources, we don't have the manpower, and therefore we need assistance. And Tele has just utterly ignored this. So Afriforum actually launched a petition. We've got just over 30,000 people that have signed it up to now. And I think we'll probably go into discussion with the police within the next 14 days. I think it's worrying, though, to see how the police, and specifically Tele, neglected to make sure that the necessary checks and balances were in place before the COVID crisis, because now he's banned, for example, farm watchers or neighborhood watchers to do their patrols, but the visible policing head office of the country was closed 2 weeks ago because of people having tested positive. And we're seeing that in the Western Cape at the moment, 150 public order police members have been put into self-isolation, and we already don't have enough public order police members. So it's a chain reaction, it's a snowball effect of deterioration when it comes to the South African Police Service, and it's sad because we still have fantastic members on ground level. Not everyone, but a lot of the ground level members really are good, and they're trying their best to do a lot with very limited resources.
Right. Now, you mentioned self-isolation. We'll come back to that in a second. Ben has asked, can Ian please repeat the emergency phone number for that service you provide?
Yeah, of course. I can do that with pleasure. The number is 0861 116 154. If they need help or anything, they can just go to Afriforum's website and they can follow the prompts there to get involved or to get that service, get access to that.
And for that place where they can add their name, is that also on the Afriforum website?
Yeah, they'll be able to follow it there. They'll find the link for the petition there as well.
Right. Okay. Now, you just touched on self-isolation. This is becoming a very disturbing area when it comes to the way the government is acting or using their powers under lockdown. I sent you those 2 PDFs from KwaZulu-Natal, where they talk about having the power now to actually take someone out of self-isolation and put them into enforced quarantine. Have you got comments on that?
Yeah, I think first of all, just to say the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Sihle Zikalala, is really getting a lot of threats, or rather a lot of criticism because of the statements that he's been making. People are saying that he's a total dictator, an autocrat at most, and I think it's very worrying to see this when you take all the other parts into consideration when it comes to the way that the military has acted in some cases, and in many cases they've been very professional. And the same challenge with the police. It's important that we don't generalize when it comes to it, but what worries me about this is the direct influence that political figures like the Premier of KZN has on what is happening on ground level. I mean, if we start forcing people into quarantine, and if you threaten them with arrest, I mean, you showed the photos I've sent you. Those people have been forced in there, and they haven't even been tested, and they've been forced in there after 5 weeks of self-isolation in a low-risk area. So it just goes to show that there's a really a bit of a power. I don't know if you could call it a power struggle, but a power trip with some of the politicians involved, and it seems that they are on a very different mission to just defeating COVID-19.
Okay, I'm just showing those photos that you sent me earlier this evening. Is there anything more you can share about the family who've been forced into quarantine at this place?
Yeah, so our legal team is actually speaking with them at the moment. So I think the bit that's important is to say that they have to stay there for 14 days. It's completely dilapidated, as you've seen. I mean, that the toilet that they need to use is absolutely disgusting. And I don't think it would be fair to say you could keep young children there, and this family has to stay there with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Very difficult situation. And the interesting part about that specific case is that with the police escort that they received from the border, some of the vehicles never even arrived there with the escort, and the excuse was simply that they broke down. We're not seeing one form of communication. And when you look at this family being forced there, I think in the next few days we'll hear more about it. Unfortunately, I can't say everything about them.
Right.
But if we see more about them in the following days, possibly in the media or so, I think it really poses, or it really gives you the picture of the danger that we are facing when it comes to this whole police, almost militaristic way of doing things in a country that's already very corrupt and has already got serious challenges when it comes to corruption, because now you've got people that are completely incompetent in certain very senior positions in government, and they have to make crucial decisions. And it's worrying to see. Once again, we can go look at Bekitele, and it's very clear that he's not sure about what he's doing, even though he gives that impression.
Well, I think Becky Sale's got an IQ problem, quite honestly, but anyway, that's my own personal view. Now, you mentioned, moving towards a police state, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that's what the ANC government is using this lockdown to actually bring in, just basically to enforce its own position. And I know you've been very active with two of their recent developments, which is this establishment of the National Security Council and the South African National Security Secretariat. Can you tell us what that's all about?
Sure. So first of all, I must just say I'm not a legal expert, so I'm going to explain it in the most basic way that I possibly can.
Yeah.
I think first of all, just to create a little bit more clarity, even it's important that we don't underestimate the powers that be when it comes to the COVID-19 crisis and the lockdown. And the reason I say that is that it is still the same ANC that we had 4 weeks ago, 4 months ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Nothing's changed. It's still a mostly corrupt organization. And I think some people would disagree with me and say I can't generalize like that, but unfortunately the track record that they have speaks for itself, and we shouldn't think that they wouldn't abuse a situation like the lockdown for their own benefit. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. Certain parts of the country, we've seen a lot of very negative political slurs, even racial slurs in some cases, made by police members. And something like the National Security Council, that worries me is that it actually contradicts the Constitution. So now we've got something that's just been announced in a government gazette. It's just been gazetted and said that we're going to do this. And instead of following all the correct procedures, making sure that it is streamlined with the Constitution, that the relevant checks and balances are in place for people to make sure that there's no abuse of power when it comes to this body. They've now announced this, and it's also made clear that the council can have several ministers or senior authorities on the council or in the council, and they can make certain decisions when it comes to intelligence. So something, I think a silly example, but I think it would create the picture, is that if they wanted to understand your finances better, they would be able to get the National Treasury, they would get the Minister of Finance in the name of national security. They would then say, but we need to investigate this person's finances. So it would really be a breach not only on your constitutional rights, but in many cases just your basic privacy, where they are becoming this power-hungry machine trying to gain control of everything. And I think it's very clear that they're trying to centralize certain bodies, as they want to do with the NHI. And I'm not an expert on health services, but they want to centralize it because everyone's equal, but some are more equal than others. So we'll still see that the president will get private healthcare, but everyone else has to only visit state institutions, that type of thing. And I think it's a very, very dangerous move that they are making. I also think it might be a very unnecessary move by the president, because I think he had the opportunity to gain a little bit of credibility during especially the lockdown. And I must be honest, I was one of the first people who said, in terms of my team when we discussed it, that I don't think we should think that Cyril Ramaphosa will save us. And a lot of people differed from me externally, from other organizations and groups, even journalists. But I think he had a real opportunity. And I think the way that things are going now, they're making far more enemies than friends. And that's not just from one cultural group or one, a certain part of South Africa.
Right.
That really is a general feeling at the moment amongst people on the ground. I mean, I spoke to a gentleman from a anti-crime organization in Soweto earlier, and we've become very good friends over the years. And Sipiwe just said to me, but it's an absolute joke. We are being completely disadvantaged, and there's no way that we can keep our people safe. We're not allowed to patrol the streets anymore. We had a fantastic neighborhood watch, and now suddenly we hear about these incidents. But as soon as we go and try and help people, we are arrested ourselves. And I think that's the danger of something like the National Security Council. People shouldn't see it as something that's up there, the pie in the sky type of idea. It really is something that can be felt, like we are feeling the way that certain parts of government are treating South Africans during the lockdown.
Right. Now, I'm sort of starting to get a really serious picture that policy in South Africa, the policy that's actually going through the parliament, is not written by the politicians or people who've been elected to do this sort of stuff, and in particular expropriation of land without compensation. It's actually been put together by NGOs, non-government organizations, and I don't know if you've heard of Professor Ruth Hall, but she works for an organization called PLAS, and clearly she is the person who's behind the policies that have been written and presented to Parliament, by the ANC. It's not something that's been done by elected officials. It's been done by NGOs like PLAS. Now, the really disturbing thing about PLAS is that most of their funding comes from George Soros and the Open Society Foundation, which has got its fingers everywhere in the ANC government. Are you familiar with the situation with the NGOs and the impact and the effect and what they're doing when it comes to policy with the government?
I've heard a lot about it. I mean, our focus, I must be honest, Scott, is mostly regarding crime and specifically violent crime in South Africa. But obviously, it would be worrying. I think the challenge that we have with many of the organizations that are providing, for example, providing documentation or creating policy or writing policy or drafting policy for government very often aren't on the ground, whether their ideological background or foundation matches what we believe. It doesn't really matter. I think there's a separation between what government is doing and what they are saying and what is happening on the ground at the moment. And I think that's the worrying part, is that the decisions that are being made are definitely not in terms of the challenges that are being faced on the ground. Interesting thing that I can share with you, you might have seen it in the media about 2-3 weeks ago. Afriforum decided to distribute hand sanitizer to emergency services who were in dire need. We've done it for old age homes as well, care homes, hospices, hospitals, and so forth. The interesting thing was the police in Gauteng then said to us, sorry, we can't accept it because there's a specific general who said that we're not allowed to accept it. Whether we have hand sanitizer or not, we can't accept it. And it was absolutely laughable that almost 2 weeks later, even now, a lot of the police units still don't have hand sanitizer or masks to wear while they are on duty. The very funny part was one of the specialized units or special units that I spoke with have about 80 members, and out of the 80 members, they received 15 gloves and about a liter of hand sanitizer. So one guy would have only gotten one glove. The point is just that, what politicians are saying and what they are deciding is far away from what the reality on the ground is.
Well, you must have seen that iconic photo of the white lady walking her dog in Cape Town and being harassed by 7 police in 3 cars. Did you see that?
I did see it. The other one that I saw that also boggled my mind was an old lady, actually also close to Soweto, that was selling like pickled vegetables or achar or something next to the road.
Right.
And the police arrested her for it. And that's the only way that she can, put food on the table is through selling that little bottle of something to members of the public. So I think we're missing the point when it comes to this. I mean, I listened to someone like Bekitele, and they have banned the sale of cigarettes. And I think to myself, what impact would cigarettes have had on the lockdown whatsoever? Or hot food, the sale of hot food. There's so many very strange decisions that they've made that have actually just disadvantaged everyone in the country, most likely themselves as well.
Yeah, why I see the white lady walking her dog as such an iconic photo is because she's totally in isolation. There's no one near her. She's just walking her dog in a quiet residential area, and there's this mob of police who come in and apprehend her and arrest her. Whereas when there's looting going on, the police sit and watch from the side. There's a complete dereliction of duty.
Yeah, I can tell you from the experience that I've had with a lot of the police on ground level, is that they are very often, and it's not an excuse, so don't understand me wrong, I'm not justifying their action, but when I speak with a lot of them, they just say, look, I can't take action because if I take action in many cases, it will most likely be politicized. If it's not politicized, I will be treated like the criminal and not the criminal him or herself. And it's not like that in all cases, but the challenges that we have after something like Marikana is that a lot of public order police men and women are scared of doing what they need to do, or they are more careful of what they're doing, what they need to do. The problem with this is that in that case, when it comes to something like public violence, you can't have hesitation. You need to be sure of what you're doing. And if you start hesitating in that situation, not only are you putting yourself at risk, but you're also putting your fellow officers at risk. And that's a very worrying part. I've said a lot of things are worrying, and it really is worrying. But I think the challenge that they have is that they really are few and far in between when it comes to the crime challenge they face. The entire circle or the chain of the justice process that needs to be completed, from where someone is apprehended to where they are successfully prosecuted and sentenced, is a very broken one. And a lot of the police just say, but I've arrested the same guy 10 times for the same crime, and it's just not prosecuted properly. He keeps on getting bail, and he just does the same thing. And so the list can continue. So the morale in the police is not great. I spoke to a very senior member of a special unit also during the hand sanitizer debacle, and he just said to me, I can't wait to retire. I've got 4 or 5 years left. He says, and I'm counting the years because all I want is my pension, and then I want to go and leave this place. I hate every moment. And it's not the first time I've heard that. And I think it's a sad story because we had a pretty incredible police service at one stage,
we did.
or police force at one stage.
Yeah.
And no police force is ever innocent. That's a fact. But the way things are going now, we're really going to struggle to turn things around when it comes to the South African police service.
Right. No, I totally agree with you on that. Now, when we're talking about the government and the ANC, isn't their motivation now to be like a dictator? Their treatment of people by certain people in the ANC during the lockdown has been quite extraordinary. What are your thoughts on that?
I must agree with you that in many places that is definitely the picture that's being created. When I look at the Western Cape, I don't see it being enforced in the same way. It seems that especially from the provincial government and even local government in the Western Cape, there's a little bit more of an understanding when it comes to the challenges people face. This doesn't mean that they are completely innocent or anything like that. I mean, all government departments, I think, face certain challenges, but the way that they are conducting certain things compared to the rest of the country differs quite drastically. I believe we're gonna face a serious problem in the coming months because I think a lot of people are going to go hungry, and I think this power-hungry approach by certain political figures in the country will most likely increase violence in some parts. We've already seen in parts of the Western Cape, specifically around the Cape Flats, we've seen probably the most looting compared to anywhere else in the country, and there are many different perceptions about why that is happening. But the point is that we're definitely going to face challenges because of this, and I think it's setting a bit of a precedent when it comes to the treatment of people. And the other challenge that we have is that a lot of people in the armed forces or security forces, when it comes to police, South African National Defence Force, even correctional services or military police, they can simply say, sorry, I misinterpreted the regulations, and they're going to be okay on the other end. And that's worrying because it seems that there aren't enough bodies in place or large enough bodies in place to keep them in check. And I think it really is a slippery slope that we're heading towards.
Right. Now, there seems to, you mentioned the Western Cape, that there seems to be a very autocratic municipality in the city of Cape Town. Some of the things they're doing, like, for example, putting all those homeless people into that enforced camp at Strandfontein, which a lot of people found to be totally objectionable. What are Afriforum's thoughts on that?
I think I've got mixed feelings on it, Scott. Just very close to our office, there are one of those camps that the City of Tshwane Metropolitan Council have put up, and they put a lot of homeless people in there. And the challenges faced in a place like that, and it's a difficult thing because let me start by saying, when they opened that camp about 2-3 weeks ago, we suddenly saw a theft increase in the area, and then what also happened was that the let's call them inmates, for lack of a better word, in the way that a lot of them are being treated, escaped, or they climbed over the fences, they stole the mattresses and whatever else they got, and they ran away.
Right.
A lot of them are also, unfortunately, are drug addicts, and that poses a lot of challenges by itself. I think when it comes to the city of Cape Town, the drug problem or social crime problem or social challenges when it comes to alcohol abuse, drug abuse, really is very high compared to many other parts of the country. Now, the challenges that they face in a place like the Western Cape, and I think that's why we often see very strongly worded, for example, bylaws coming through from something like the city of Cape Town, is that the police are completely outnumbered in the Western Cape compared to any other province. So the majority of vacant positions in the South African Police Service per province in the country for years has been the Western Cape. And the Western Cape, and sorry, just to create more context, I think the reason for this is most likely because the ANC know that the police is a national body, and it's something that the ANC can control far more than the governing party in the Western Cape, which is the Democratic Alliance. And therefore, they want things to go worse there because it might create a change where they can, come to power. Now, the problem with this is it's actually forcing the Western Cape government and the city of Cape Town to then also start enforcing certain things that makes them a little bit stronger to make sure that the law is enforced, because the South African Police Service don't have the capacity to do so, and because of political interference, it would in most cases mean that a lot of the cases that they should tend to or that they should sort out might not happen. I don't know if you remember General Arno Lamour, that was arrested a few years ago because of his involvement with a lot of the larger or more prominent gangs in the Western, or specifically in Cape Town, and also the illegal trade of arms and ammunition.
Right.
Those are the types of challenges that we've often seen in the Western Cape, and I think it might in the future pose a problem when it comes to the lesser of two evils. I think for now, the city of Cape Town are doing quite well, although they've had challenges with some of the law enforcement officials in the past. They're doing better than other parts of the country. I'm not sure where it's heading. I agree with you that it's a very dangerous, once again, a slippery slope. But what do you do? And I'm playing devil's advocate. What do you do in a situation like the lockdown? Because you can only arrest X amount of people, and you've already got a clogged up legal system when it comes to the MPA and courts of law. So how are you going to make sure that everyone's prosecuted, and what are you going to do with them when they are prosecuted? How are you going to police them? So it's a difficult situation, Scott. I actually don't have a perfect answer for you. I'm just discussing all the thoughts that I think kind of color in this situation that we're in.
Right. Now, I just want to address the side chat and to people watching the live stream. First of all, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm really honored to have Ian with us. And if you have questions you'd like to put to Ian, just put them into the side chat, and one of the moderators will copy it. And when I'm ready, I'll ask them to paste them back into the side chat, and I'll just pass them over to Ian to answer. Now, talking about the city of Cape Town, Ian, I sent you that document, the one about streets, public places, and noise nuisance. And I know it's a draft bylaw, but don't you think that this is really an overreach when it comes to the powers that the police in Cape Town have?
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see how they, or if they announce it as it is, and what the possible changes, but through the public participation process may be. It's important to say that this is specifically aimed at Metro Police, and not at the South African Police Service. And
Right.
I have a feeling, and I don't know all the background, Scott, so I'm commenting on what I've read in that draft, is that I've got a feeling that the South African Police Service in many cases haven't enforced the law with some of the basic challenges that are written down in that draft. And therefore, I think it's just come to a point where the City of Cape Town are going to try and do it themselves. Whether it's the right thing, I think it's a whole discussion on its own. And once again, I think if they are not careful, it definitely will have or hold the threat of becoming another, completely controlled state, if that's the right term, term to use. But I believe it can be managed in the correct way. I just think it's very important that they do it right. I know, in the Western Cape, specifically around Bellville a few months ago, we had a challenge with a guest house that was filled with a lot of police officials living there, supposedly on training, or they were deployed in the Western Cape from district level, and they weren't being used for service. So they were literally sitting at a guest house in a normal residential area, and they were using a lot of alcohol, they were making a lot of noise, they were sitting drunk in the cars outside,
Right.
and a lot of them were swimming naked in the pool at the guest house, and people were filming this from houses surrounding this guest house. And once again, the police didn't do anything. Now, I don't know if they didn't do something because it was their own, or whether they knew each other, or whether they just didn't know how to handle it. But that is going to force not only civil society, but also well-managed local government institutions to try and build acts or laws or regulations that would suit them better in order to handle it themselves, because they cannot trust the powers, like in some cases, unfortunately, the South African Police Service to do it for them.
Right. Now, you've touched on the food situation a couple of times, and food security and the farmers and this whole issue. One of the very disturbing things that I'm hearing about food delivery by the ANC, the 250,000 food parcels that Ramaphosa talks about, is that apparently a lot of that food is just being given to family and friends and not being given to the starving. Now, the other issue I'm hearing is that it's been selectively handed out only to the black population. In other words, we've got little towns, and I'm hearing from several of them, where the ANC cadres come in with the food parcels. They're wearing ANC T-shirts. They drive right past the whites waiting for food parcels, totally ignore them, and then go into the black townships and deliver there, and then drive off. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, just from the get-go, I think it's important that we don't expect the government to look after anyone properly, for that matter. So from our side, from Afriforum side, we've already decided to take responsibility in the places where we have some form of influence. So just last week, my team and I, including the community affairs team from Afriforum, along with Solidarity Helping Hand and SAI, which is an agricultural initiative, worked together to deliver just over 5 tons of avos to elderly or needy elderly people in and around the Pretoria area. And not one of those old age homes received any form of care, aid, funding, or anything from government. And the grants that some of the elderly are meant to receive from government simply aren't enough. And with the risk of COVID-19 or the supposed risk, and the danger of going out without a permit, maybe going to the wrong place without a permit, is just so much that some of the elderly then simply cannot even go out for food. So yes, there is a serious challenge when it comes to food delivery or care delivery when it from government. I think the other worrying part is that we're hearing sounds of government wanting to centralize any form of aid when it comes to something like food. that they want all organizations to give it to them at a central point, and they will then decide how it is distributed to the relevant people. And that could be disastrous, because we know that we cannot trust many parts of government. Some parts, I think, are doing very well in the current situation that we're in. Something like the National Information Center, when it comes to COVID-19, are doing a fantastic job. And then we've got other places where we see council members at municipalities stealing the aid packages that were set up for the poor and for the needy. So it's a very dangerous thing that government would want to centralize something like that, and I think we need to do everything we possibly can to stop them from doing that, because we simply cannot, or they simply cannot make sure that the food gets into the people or gets to the people who need it most. Once again, Scott, I would like to repeat from our side, we've made the decision already that we will help where we see fit and where we believe it's very important to help. And those old age homes or the squatter camps that we often hear about, where a lot of Afrikaans people live and they haven't received any form of aid from government, we can then try and assist there too. And we need to do that. I think it's important that we don't just wait for government, because I think we're going to wait for a long time. We need to make sure that we can help anyone that is in need, and we need to make sure that we don't have this supposed, this waiting for government to do something, because I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. Now, this channel supports a few groups that actually provide food aid to largely impoverished white people. One is called Farmers Aid South Africa. It's run by Patrick, and he was actually driving around South Africa just a week ago with something like 300 food parcels that he delivered, a huge amount of food parcels. And there's another group in Pretoria called Go Purple that we actually support as well. Those groups, which are always looking for funding, is there anything or someone they can contact within Afriforum or Solidarity to have a look at funding support, if they can show that money is going to go for food parcels and help communities that they're working with?
Yeah, I think the important thing for them would be to speak with Solidarity Helping Hand, of Solidariteit Helpende Hand, and to get into contact with them. They've got phenomenal structures across the country, and I mean, just in the last 2 weeks, they've helped over 4,000 families already with food, and I think it can make a quite a large impact. The more organizations collaborate when it comes to these types of issues, the stronger it can be. I think the challenge is to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel in places where something strong might already be in existence. So if we can, complement each other in certain ways or certain areas with unique skill sets that we have, then we can strengthen it. But my advice would be to get into contact with Solidarity Helping Hand. They're doing a phenomenal job with this specific topic.
I actually spoke to the CEO on a live stream, the CEO of Solidarity on a live stream just about a week ago. Lovely man.
Yes.
He couldn't get his camera going. It was so frustrating. But we heard what he had to say.
Excellent.
Now, okay, we're talking about the impoverished portion of South Africa, and regardless of color, when people are starving, they get desperate, and you can understand that. And I think the reason there is so much looting starting to happen in South Africa is because people are starving. They haven't got any money, they haven't got any food, they've got families. The only way they can get anything is by looting or breaking out into anarchy. Now, you're an expert in this area. What are the signs that we got to watch out for, leading up to a situation where the police lose control?
I think there are many different factors that we need to consider. I think the first thing is that we've already got a hunger crisis in the country. We need to accept that. I think the last people that were going to get a full salary or a lot, let's rather say a lot of people would have received a full salary now
Yeah.
at the end of April, and a lot of people aren't going to receive anything at the end of May. I spoke to a family that live in Attridgeville, just outside Pretoria, in a shack, just about 2-3 days ago, and both the husband and the wife have lost their jobs within the space of a week. Both of them have been retrenched, and they've just had a baby 2 weeks ago, and they now have no way of providing for their family. So I think that is not going to be unique in the coming weeks, even the coming months. I think the damage that it's going to do is really going to be quite significant. And I think we can expect to see an increase in something like looting. We can expect an increase in public violence in general. And as soon as the lockdown starts to be loosened up a little bit, we might see an increase in it. I think the challenge when it comes to public violence at the moment for the people who would like to protest is that in some areas they are being policed in such a way that it is very, very difficult for them to really get momentum. But I don't think it is going to be very long. I think people have a misperception of the amount of soldiers that have been deployed. We don't have any more than 3, even 4,000 soldiers on the streets at the moment, and at any one time the police don't have more than 30,000 police officials per shift in the entire country. So it really is a very small amount of people that need to do policing. And the challenges that we're going to face, or the things that we need to look out for, are obviously an increase in something like cell phone tower battery theft. It's already increasing. A lot of people would use those batteries to power their informal housing. We would see an increase in copper cable theft. We've already seen that in certain areas. And I think the amount of people that would get involved in these types of challenges will also increase. The other part is something like housebreaking or burglary. We'll definitely see an increase in that. People are going to do a lot more to try and feed their families, and we are definitely going to face more and more famine in certain parts of the country. And as you said correctly, the aid packages that do exist don't always get to the right people, or not enough gets to the right people. And if you need to start, telling a kilometer long line of people that there is not enough food for them, then you're going to start facing a problem. And that is definitely on the increase. And we've seen it in places like Diepsloot and so on. The challenge is also where to next, because now you've got a frustrated community that are very, very poor. Where are they going to protest next? And will this pose a threat to another community? Some of the more rural areas will see that there'll be an increase in protest, and then we'll see that they would sabotage the water reservoir. So now suddenly you don't have the correct water provision for the entire town or the entire area. Those types of challenges will definitely increase.
Right. Okay, I'm just looking at the side chat here. There are quite a few questions coming through. We'll get to those very shortly. Okay, just continuing with this theme. Crime reduction and increases during the lockdown in South Africa. How has crime been impacted by the lockdown in general?
No, drastically. There's definitely a decrease in certain crimes. I think there will be we'll only be able to see it in a few months, but there will be an increase in certain other crimes like the trade in illicit cigarettes, that type of thing. But I think the mistake that's being made, and it's quite laughable from someone like Wikitsele, who is saying that alcohol is the main reason for violence or violent crime in South Africa, is absolutely absurd. It just doesn't make sense. During the lockdown, we've seen that domestic violence has increased very, very, very drastically. And that cannot be blamed on something like alcohol. Yes, alcohol is a trigger for some violence and for some crime, and we see that places where people gather to drink or socialize together where there is a lot of alcohol being used, there's a higher chance for violence in some cases. But to simply say that alcohol is the reason that or alcohol is the main reason for violent crime is absurd. South Africa is a very violent country. We've got a very violent background, and we live in a very violent society. And it's important that we realize that we cannot only depend on government to safeguard us, because they simply, sometimes I don't think they have the will to do so. Certain parts of government, other parts I think do. And then we also have the massive shortage of resources when it comes to safeguarding communities. But the crime issue, I think, is a very temporary one that's kind of being stopped by the lockdown, because as soon as the lockdown starts slowing down or starts being loosened, I really think we're going to see an increase in certain crimes. So it's only temporary, and I can't see government having the money, unless China gives them some more, to keep the promised 70,000 soldiers on the streets. I still don't know how they're going to transport them or mobilize them or deploy them, but we'll see when we get there.
Right. And when we talk about crime, we've got a lot of people watching this video now, and a lot of people in South Africa who will watch it later. What is the role that they can play to try and help prevent crime in South Africa during the lockdown?
I think the easiest thing for community members to do would be to be part of a communication network in their direct community. They need to be able to speak with each other, speak to their neighbors. They need to be able to share any type of incident or any type of suspicious behavior around them. I think that's the easiest part. Unfortunately, with the challenge regarding patrols, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But through people communicating and being aware of what's happening around the residential area that they live in, or whether it's in a rural area or an urban area, it doesn't matter. They need to make sure that they are aware and that they are communicating with other people. It's crucial that you have some form of a emergency plan. I'm not saying a panic plan. I'm not saying you need to buy food for 8 months ahead. I'm saying that you need to know what to do if you would face a certain emergency. How do you handle yourself? How do you speak with your family? Do your children know what to do? And without creating panic, you need to be able to handle those types of situations. And it's important when it comes to violent crime that you have some form of a previous discussion with your family before that incident happens. And I think a lot of people still have the mindset that it's not going to happen to them. They are unique in a certain way, but we should rather have the mindset of it's going to happen to us. It's just a matter of time. And it's not to be panicky. It's rather to be prepared.
Right. Now, one of the obvious questions is regarding what's going on during this lockdown. How compromised have civil liberties become in South Africa, and is a lockdown constitutional? I mean, can they actually do this based on the Constitution?
Well, I'm not a constitutional expert, but from a crime perspective, or from the limitation of movement perspective, I think some parts of the lockdown are starting to now infringe on people's general well-being. I think that the impact that it's had on the economy is astounding. We all know the negative influence that it's had on that. But certain basic things that you should be able to do, like go outside and exercise, or to take a walk, little things that don't influence anyone else's health, really are being infringed upon. I think the challenge that the government has is that they themselves, or certain parts of government, have themselves, over the years, actually started nurturing this culture of criminality, or rather a culture of corruption, and therefore they will now find it very, very difficult to enforce the law as it should be done, because they themselves haven't been able to stick to that over a very long period of time. So I find it quite laughable when I read comments on, for example, Twitter, where some people, speak of certain political leaders at the moment as being heroes. And I just think to myself, but a month or two ago, those same people were saying how corrupt the ANC was, and now suddenly they've turned into absolute heroes. And don't get me wrong, I think certain parts of the lockdown have been handled well by government. I think with the lack of resources and the lack of knowledge, a lot of the decisions or the comments that have been made have done quite well. But unfortunately, it's too little too late. And for society to now suddenly have trust in this government is very, very difficult, especially on a national government level. The example that they have set over the years is one of mistrust, one of corruption, and one of criminality. And unfortunately now we have to trust the powers that be. And it's a very difficult situation to be in, because where do you draw the line? You need to obey the law. I think it's important that we obey the law. But at what point does the law start infringing on people's basic constitutional rights?
Yeah. Now, I think one of the elephants in the room when it comes to the way Ramaphosa is perceived and his government is perceived is the media, because they have their own narrative, and a lot of what they pump out is just so biased. I got an email from Wayne, and I'll just read to you what he said. He said, "Now the great tragedy of Ramaphosa being called and you know what he was called, really. We had a farm attack about a month ago in the Stuttenheim area, which is about 100 kilometers from East London. There was a lone farmer, 71 years old, brutally murdered. Not a single word was published in the local newspapers. They tied this farmer up, beat his head to a pulp with an iron stamper, what you had used to compact ground before throwing concrete. They then had a party in his house with meat from the fridge and booze from the cabinet. Then they sped off and had an accident." I mean, this is the point that's been made here, is that comment that was made in an obscure Facebook page about Ramaphosa became newsworthy. And in your area, when it comes to farm attacks and farm murders with the mainstream media, you must be pulling your hair out, because they just completely ignore what's going on.
Yeah, I think there's this political stigma around farm attacks. Look, and I think both sides of the media, whether it would be extreme left or extreme right, are very often guilty of generalization, because I think if farm attacks were approached in the right way when it comes to research from the start, we would have a far more accurate picture of the reality, and I think more people would be giving attention to it. But unfortunately, we have people only ranting on about one side, where you've got the far left saying, yeah, but all farmers attack their workers and they hurt their workers and they kill their workers. We very often hear that from the very far left, black first, land first type of comment. And then on the far right side, you hear that every single farm attack is part of, this pre-planned notion of killing white farmers. And we simply cannot say that, because the evidence at hand doesn't show us one of those two extremes. In some cases, it definitely shows us parts of those stories, and we need to go and look into those, and we need to understand them, and we need to see how we can stop them. Because I personally have been to murder scenes and attack scenes where racial slurs were made and where political comments were made by the attackers, and where it seems to have been more of a racial issue. But I've also been to other ones where it wasn't the case at all, where it started out very relaxed, where the attacker wasn't even a South African, where he or she had only lived in the country for a very, very short time, and they were then influenced by an external group of criminals, and they were blackwashed. They basically said to them, look, if you don't give us more information on the farmer, we are going to hurt you. We know where your child goes to school, we know where your wife lives, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got that type of incident. So the challenge that we now have is that some of the mainstream media just completely fails to report on farm attacks unless it somehow suits their political narrative. And that's the sad part, because now you've got victims, innocent victims, being hurt, whether it's for a political reason, for a criminal reason, or for anything else. They are being hurt, and their story is not being told because a journalist or a certain media institution have a preconceived idea of why that incident happened. And that's wrong, because that journalist or that media institution should be writing an objective story of reality, of what is really happening, and they should be reporting on that accurately. And that's not happening. And we can clearly see, we see cases like the coffin case of what happened a
that was
short while
just
ago.
shocking.
Or the Kulini case, where whether right or wrong, that's a debate on its own. The point is just, so many mainstream media institutions almost over-reported on that.
Yeah.
It's the only thing you heard.
What about Vicky Mumberg?
Exactly. What about someone like Nikki Bloom or Nikki Simpson? Nikki Simpson is a beautiful old lady that lives close to Fochville in Gauteng. She was attacked and they tortured her with an electric drill and they hurt her very, very badly. And I'm not going to go into those details because it's horrible. They're horrible stories to tell. And I think we all know the reality of it. The point is just that those stories aren't told by mainstream institutions. And the interesting part is that we had a lot of, predominantly more left-wing, as we know it in world terms, especially in the American terms, come here and ask us to show them farm attack victims, for them to speak with them. And we spent time with the journalists and with the victims all together. And it was magnificent to speak with those journalists afterwards, where the majority of them would say, but we didn't know that this was happening. This is not the story that's being portrayed to the outside world. It's always either laughed off as just being a bunch of crazy people talking about something that doesn't exist, or we are told about this absolute euphoric place with a little bit of a crime problem. And that's not the case. We are facing an extremely violent onslaught when it comes to rural crime in South Africa.
Right. Now, I'm going to start actually relating questions that we've received in the side chat to you, Ian. So I'm going to start off with one from Ian Gilliamy. He says, is there DA officials working with Afriforum? Any support?
So what I can say, first of all, is that Afriforum doesn't affiliate with any political party or other political organization. Where there are situations or specific incidents where we can work together to assist the community, we will do that. But it's important that people understand that we're not affiliating with a specific set of political ideologies or rules or regulations that specific party might be involved with. When it comes to a party like the Democratic Alliance, in some parts of the country, we've had phenomenal cooperation when it comes to neighborhood watches, for example, where Democratic Alliance neighborhood watches and Democratic Alliance municipalities have come forward and done major support for neighborhood watches and farm watches, and in other areas not so much. So it depends from the area in the country, and it depends how we approach each other. The challenge, as with the media discussion that we just had regarding farm attacks, is that there are a lot of preconceived ideas, whether it's about Afriforum, the Democratic Alliance, or any other organization, and that often influences the cooperation that you might have been able to gain on ground level. I mean, to give you an idea, Scott, a few years ago, we had a very, very strong farm watch in the Eastern Cape with a group of taxi drivers, taxi associations, and then also farmers. And the group of taxi drivers and the farmers patrolled together. And the results that we saw when it comes to stock theft were phenomenal. You cannot believe the decrease that we saw in stock theft in that area. The cooperation with the police and the municipality was fantastic. It was a total ANC municipality. And then, some of the powers that be changed in the area, and corruption started, lifting its evil head again.
Yeah.
And it got worse. And then things started changing again. So it really does depend from place to place. And Afriforum would like to to say that especially when it comes to government departments, we are willing to work together, but it's important that people know that we don't have a gray area when it comes to right or wrong. If someone is corrupt, it's very difficult to then work with that person because we need to do something about the corruption.
Right. Now, Stephen Veldhagen has asked, could you ask Ian where the hotspots are for farm murders, and is there a database of these murders, and how can these be accessed?
Yeah, so you're more than welcome, Stephen, to go onto Afriforum's website. You can go and search around there. I can tell you a little bit of the hotspots or about the hotspots. First of all, we've got farm attacks all over the country. I think the place that is the least affected is the Northern Cape, and the place with the highest frequency of attacks is definitely Gauteng province. Now, the reason for this would most likely be that Gauteng province has the highest frequency of people, and the closer people live together, the higher the chances for violence are. So yeah, Gauteng is quite high. When it comes to provinces, it is important to say that it does fluctuate, but I would say that it swaps between parts of the Free State, Northwest Province, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga. And those provinces, obviously Gauteng, I'm not even going to speak about Gauteng, it's actually a whole mission on its own. But the provinces surrounding Gauteng are mostly the ones where we see a high frequency of attacks. Interestingly enough, over the past 2 years, we've seen quite a drastic increase, especially in 2019, in the Western Cape. And suddenly in 2020, the Western Cape figures have stagnated completely. It's just slowed down totally. Obviously, the lockdown has had an influence. But I hope that answers your question. If you've got more questions about it, you can send an email to Afriforum and we can assist you with more detail.
Right. Do you think the way hotspots appear is because there is a gang that just specializes in this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it does play a role. I wouldn't say it's the only reason. I think in certain parts, well, I know that in certain parts you've got almost like a syndicate that operates in an area for a while. Interestingly enough, as well, Scott, is that they travel quite far. A few months ago, we actually made an arrest with the police and another security organization where the attackers would travel more than 150 kilometers, almost 200 kilometers, to the area in which they operated, and they had a whole transport network worked out and everything. Wow. So it's phenomenal the way these guys plan. In fact, some of these attacks are performed with absolute military precision, and we often see that they know exactly what they're doing. Some of them aren't very intelligent too, so I must say we see the opposite too, that they're just really, really, really not good at what they're doing, and they should rather just stay away from crime because they are absolutely useless at it, and then they just get caught very easily. But then we have others that really are professional at what they do, and I think that's the worrying part, is that farm attacks in some cases, in some provinces especially, have become a highly specialized crime. And I would go as far as saying that if you really had to start drawing the lines between farm attacks, rhino poaching, cash in transit heist, copper cable theft, and even the bat robberies, with the cigarette trucks, you would find incredible resemblances between them. I'm pretty sure a lot of the same firearms and so on are used between different syndicates. They are hired, they are lended by people, so it really does depend from case to case. The other part I think that you would find interesting is that, depending on where you go in the country, you would find that a lot of the attackers aren't even South Africans. Some parts of the country, you would find that the most of the attackers would be from Zimbabwe or Mozambique. Other parts, you would see that they might be a mixture of South Africans and people from Lesotho. Other parts, they might be from Eswatini or Swaziland and KwaZulu-Natal. And so the gangs that operate really do mix, and it changes constantly. It's not something that's set in stone.
Right. Now, I've got another question here from Michelle Mullard. She says, I want to know how Ian feels about secession. It would be nice to have his honest opinion if our situation will ever get better. We've been treading water for years now.
It's a difficult question because I don't have the perfect answer for it. So I'm going to share what my opinion is in terms of the experience that I've gained over the years of doing the job that I do, and to share what I believe might be held in the future. I think first of all, as I said a little bit earlier, we need to realize that we shouldn't depend on government on its own. I think we need to follow a double strategy, and the way that Afriforum is doing it is firstly by putting pressure on government while we reach out and say, let's work together. And secondly, we start creating another alternative. Now, a lot of people I've heard say, we just need to create our own country, or, we need to create our own cultural homeland, or that type of thing. And,
Right.
and I've heard all these. It's great. It might sound great, but I don't think people always realize what it takes to really govern a place. Do people realize the administrative backbone or logistics backbone that you need to really, uphold society? It's not an easy task. So from Afriforum side, what we've said is that we've got a certain set of rules that fit in with the Constitution and with existing legislation, and within this we've created branches across the country, and anyone's welcome to join these branches. We're a proudly Afrikaans organization, but it's not an exclusive group, and we invite people to get involved in what we call do-it-yourself campaigns. An example would be that we've said that we're not going to wait for the municipality to fix the road. We're going to work together to fix the road ourselves. So a lot of people would reply then and say, but why do I pay tax, or why do I pay pay any form of rates of taxes? And obviously we understand it because we pay the same thing. But what we say is that we need to start creating a different reality in order for us to come to the point where we might be able to negotiate and say, but wait a minute, we can now start rendering this service for the community. Why are we still paying the municipality for it? So there are legal processes in place that we can start following. I don't think we've got an easy future ahead of us. I think we need to accept that. And I think the rate at which a lot of people have left the country will also make it more challenging. But that being said, I think if we start taking responsibility for the problems in the country, and we don't simply just blame people, even though it might not be our fault, we need to get stuck in, find solutions, and build them ourselves.
Right. Okay, I've got a question here from Lightning Jack. He says, can Afriforum coordinate a joint civil action for all non-BEE companies not being assisted via the COVID relief fund?
So I don't know if they must just check the media. We were actually in court with Solidarity today about specifically the Department of Tourism that announced that the whole relief structure is based on race. And we've come forward and said, but this is not acceptable. Afriforum and the same with Solidarity believe that people need to be treated with merit, regardless of who or what you are. Creed, color, culture, it doesn't matter. Everyone needs to be treated the same way. And at the moment, they've actually just started reversing what happened in the past in many cases. And now we're seeing, some ridiculous relief fund being created, and it's being promoted in a way that people think it helps all people in South Africa, when in fact it's only helping a certain racial group, which is obviously wrong.
Right. Okay. Next question. Stephen Veldhagen has asked, what would Ian recommend a family do when anarchy has totally set in? Stay put or flee the country? And what about prepping?
So I don't think we'll ever be in a situation where the entire country is in total anarchy. And the reason why I say that is that the great people, a lot of the great people who are listening now, and a lot of the other great people in the country we're not in the situation that, for example, Zimbabwe was. Now, listen to me very carefully when I say this, because I think it might sound controversial to some people. The reason I say that is because Zimbabwe had no form of organized civil society where South Africa does. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but the fact that we've started building civil organizations like an Afriforum, and it can be other organizations too, there's no problem with that, but the fact that we've built those organizations over years have means that we've got some form of accountability and we've got some form of pushback. Once again, it's not going to be easy. It's not something that's just sorted out overnight. But I think we're going to have spots of real challenges when it comes to civil unrest. And I think we're going to have other spots where things go okay. I don't think it's going to be great, but it is going to be okay. It's going to be safer. I think there'll be space for local alliances with, for example, other organizations, neighborhood watches, farm watches, other civil rights groups, where we can work together to have a local success or a local sustainable future being built. But yeah, I think in terms of the question with regards to prepping, I watched people buy toilet paper over the last few weeks. It was mind-boggling to see. I don't know if I don't know. I wouldn't have gone quite that far, but I think it's important to know that without being panicky, I think we might face changes in the coming weeks or challenges when it comes to food supply. Not because there is a shortage of food, but because logistic networks can be impacted by unrest and can also be impacted by the other challenges being created by the lockdown. So we need to make sure that we have the essential things, but I don't think we're at a point where we need to buy food for the next 6 months to a year.
Right. Okay. Now, Dee has asked, please ask Ian to name all the cities and towns where Afriforum has an office or representatives. This is of importance, in my opinion, to become more effective, efficient, and visible. Gather members and grow in strength.
Yeah, so people once again can go to the Afriforum website. It will really, there you will find a list of all the Afriforum branches in the country. I think there are just over 130 branches in South Africa. And then just over 153 neighborhood watches or / farm watches in the country. So there are quite a few to get involved with, and they also then on the website give you the whole layout of how to open or establish a branch if you should see fit.
Okay. Next question. Chase asks, Scott, can you ask Ian why Afriforum distances itself from Boer Legion, who are by far better at the ground or on the ground on policing? Why do Boer Legion back Afriforum if Afriforum ignores the role of Boer Legion?
I think it's an important question. First of all, I don't think Afriforum have ever really distanced themselves, or in many cases they haven't distanced themselves. As I said earlier, if there's a positive campaign where we can get involved and work together with, I think we will give consideration to that. My experience, unfortunately, in some cases haven't been so positive, and the one example I can use is the violence that we saw 2 to 3 years ago at high school in Vereniging called Ephra, where a lot of the members of the said organization were saying derogatory things to protesters outside the school. Now, whether they said the right thing or not, they were making our job very difficult at protecting the school, because we were working on the inside with the whole team and with the police and so forth, and it caused for violence to increase. So from Afriforum side, we want to keep peace and order between people, and we want to do that as far as we possibly can. And unfortunately, with that specific case, it didn't go so well. It also happened that a lot of bad things by the said organization was said about Afriforum. But regardless of that, I think the point is that each organization has a crucial role to play as long as it's within the framework of the law. And whether it's that organization or Afriforum, we need to make sure that we're making a positive contribution to communities in the country, and that we're finding a common ground in, for example, combating crime. And I think each different institution or organization will have a different skill set that they can bring to the party, and if we can combine that in certain cases, it might help. I think from Afriforum side, when it comes to what happens on ground level, we train between 5 and 10,000 people per year. We have grown from 0 neighborhood watches and farm watches 4.5 years or 5 years ago to over 153 and more than 12,000 people, and
Wow.
all of them are trained in something. So we've got a remarkable structure across the country, and I think we're the only civil rights group or only community safety group in the country that have that type of footprint. And we're very proud of that, and we need to be very careful at not putting any of that at risk with any wrongdoing, whether political or criminal.
Right. Now, Concerned SA has asked, will action be taken with regard to the banning of eating game meat? The next step will be the banning of hunting rifles. This can affect game farms which attract foreign hunters.
Yeah, it's also an important question. For now, it's being handled by SAI, which is the Southern African Agricultural Initiative. We have worked together in the past with some cases, like, for example, the avos that we delivered to the poor and elderly last week. But SAI are handling that at the moment. I don't see that campaign being a success by the people requesting it. I think they're taking a very big chance. I don't think they realize the incredible amount of income that market brings in for South Africa on a yearly basis. The economic impact that it has is remarkable, and we need to make sure that we protect whatever positive economic impact that we can.
Right. Now, Stephen Veldhagen has asked, how are drones changing the security landscape?
Drones are remarkable. We've got quite a large team of drone pilots, that are licensed and so on, and it really is a game changer in many cases. I think it's important that it's done within the framework of the law. I think in many cases people have ignored legislation or regulations that have been put into place for their own safety and the safety of others. So it's important that you do it right, and I think it often feels like a bit of a schlep, all the paperwork and everything, but people need to make sure that they do it the right way. But it's an absolute game changer, and I think as technology develops, it's going to have a massive impact on combating crime in the future.
Right. Now, your website is afriforum.co.za, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's quite simple, guys. Quite a few people asking, how do I get the Afriforum website? Well, it's just the name, .co.za, and you'll go straight to it. Okay, Tace Lawrence has asked, Ian, have you ever made a comparison of farm murders pre-1994 and then post-1994, and what was your finding, and why do you see such a huge increase if it is not politically motivated?
It's a good question. So I don't have all the data in front of me now, so I'm going to speak off by heart and with a little bit that I've got here. But if you go before 1991, it's very difficult to get accurate data. A lot of it is simply not available. So we don't get very accurate data from before 1991. And the challenge that we have is actually that from 1991, so that's obviously before 1994, up to about 1998 or 1997, the figures were slowly increasing, and then we had a really big increase up to about 2003. Now, the interesting thing about this, and it's just a side comment, that a lot of people often speak about the commandos being the total solution for this, and that they need to come back. And I also believe the commandos have a role to play.
Right.
But I can tell you one thing: if we bring back the commandos today, under the current military leadership that we have, I think we're going to face serious problems, and far more problems that we're already facing. Because if we can't trust them with the basic services that they need to render in certain parts, then how on earth are they going to do that with a commando system? But that being said, during the times where the commandos were at their strongest, farm attacks were also at their highest in many places. So up to about 2003, farm attack figures and farm murder figures specifically were tremendously high. And that decreased over the years. And now, for the last few years, we're seeing an increase in attacks. And as I said, murders are stabilizing quite a bit. So I hope that answers your question. Unfortunately, we don't have more data from before 1991, not accurate data in any case. But yeah, it is lower at the moment. The general picture shows that farm attacks are lower at the moment than what they were about 25 years ago. But the frequency of attacks are definitely increasing on an annual basis, and quite drastically. The percentage increases have gone up drastically over the past 2 years, and I'm afraid at the rate that which things are going, if we don't consider the lockdown, I don't see that changing anytime soon. But what I do see changing are the amount of people that are fighting back, and that is very, very, very clear. That people are fed up and that they are now fighting back, obviously within the framework of the law.
Right. Now, the question that Chase Tanner's asked is pretty much what someone else asked about Buralishion, so I'll hit a miss on that one. Lightning Jack has said, what is Afriforum's view on succession or developing white-only zones? Aranya seems to be working brilliantly. Why not work with UL8 or see how we can strengthen Aranya by entering into discussions?
So from Afriforum's side, as I said earlier, we believe very strongly in community structures and developing those structures to become sustainable on ground level. That it really is community funded, where the community works together and have control of the funds that they need to provide in order, for example, to fix roads or to combat crime. We have been in many discussions with many different organizations, and we've worked with many different cultural, racial, and other groups. And it's important to say that we believe in a more apolitical system. But yeah. So for now, we're focusing on the branch level. And it really has worked well up to now. We've come to a point in some towns where we have already started providing services, something like refuse removal. We do that ourselves now, and we don't necessarily need to pay the municipality for that. So it's grown to the point where the community really can take charge legally of certain services, and if we can develop that, then we can have far more places in the country where we can build some form of a sustainable future.
Right. And I have to ask you a question about the municipalities, and that is, why do they even bother having a council? Because they do nothing. All they do is get taxes and get paid. So they're actually taking money out of the economy and providing nothing. Isn't a better way to go just to have the community, as you said, working together, providing the services, and just getting rid of the whole idea of a council?
Definitely, and that's a direction that we're moving in. Unfortunately, it takes time, and you need to set the precedent of what you're involved with or what you're busy doing. When it comes to the councils, it's very worrying that the money doesn't go back to the community. I'll take an example like in Northwest with the Madibeng municipality in Brits that also serves the Hartbeespoort area. Now, Hartbeespoort provides, I think, more than 80% of money to the Madibeng municipality for the entire region, and only it's less than 5% that actually goes back to Hartbeespoort. And that's shocking. That means that there's absolutely no return on investment. And the challenge that we have, I think, is that in many cases, government don't realize that they are actually being paid for a service. It seems that they have just accepted that it's part of legislation that you need to pay them, and it's one of those things. Whereas you are actually their customer. They are meant to be serving you because you are paying them for it, and that's not happening.
Right. Now, Philippe van Velbergen has asked, does Ian believe that EWC will proceed, and what does he think will be the consequences?
I think they're going to push very hard for it. I think expropriation without compensation is obviously poses a major risk for the South African economy. Our economy is already in dire straits. I think we've got a lot of things to to be worried about when it comes to the economy. And it's not to be just purely negative. It's just a fact. It's not going well with the South African economy, and I think that will have a major impact. I think a lot of people started saying, something like land grabs is suddenly going to take place now. But land grabs, according to me, from what my experience is, I've been working with land grabs since 2011, 2012, around there, and it's been quite a challenging few years when it comes to land grabs. There has been an increase since the whole EWC challenge has been put on the table, and since there's been such a big discussion about it. But yeah, I think they're going to try and push it through in certain ways, and I think we need to be careful in this time that we're in at the moment, that it's not used as an excuse to get away with that.
Right. Now, Michelle Time has asked, what can Afriforum and all of us do to help speed up Advocate Carlo Viljoen's attempt at taking ANC government to The Hague, or the International Criminal Court? He's been working on it for 5 years and got 6 more to go, he says.
Yeah, I think what we've learned, I'm not an expert on the case, so I'm not going to comment directly on it. But once again, from our side, we've just said that we need to build our own new reality in the country, and we need to form branches and strong structures on the ground that we can mobilize in order for communities to build a sustainable future. I'm not convinced that only going into the international arena with a specific issue is going to solve it. It's very important that it is done. It's very important to campaign in the international arena, but I don't think it should be looked at as being the only solution. The chances of someone coming in here like a knight in shining armor and suddenly fixing things is very, very small. And I think it's going to be up to the people that are here to jump in and get things done.
Right. Now, Lightning Jack has asked, I appreciate Afriforum taking them to court to fight the general perception, but we should coordinate and take them to court for what they don't assist jointly, since we know it will happen. I think he's talking about our conversation earlier, so I'm just trying to get the context of that. I think it might be to do with Afriforum's action regarding the ANC and those two, like national security and stuff like that.
Yeah, look, we will follow all the steps and the relevant steps that are available to us. Obviously, we need to follow due course, and we will do that. So whatever things we can do to make sure that it's in the best interest of all people in the country, the more we will do that. We will take every step we see fit.
Right. Okay. And just a related question to that. Okay. What happened to Malema shooting an AK-47 at a public rally? When will he be charged?
So he's already been charged. The prosecution process is currently going. The case was postponed again. I can't remember the exact date for when he needs to appear in court again. But there was a warrant for arrest served, but it was upheld. So he needs to appear in court again soon. You can watch the media for the exact dates, but yeah, we're driving that case very, very strongly. I was involved in actually laying the charge with a colleague of mine, and we will definitely monitor that case very closely, because I don't think it was an AK-47, but I'm quite convinced that it was an assault rifle of some sort, and the stories that we've heard from people that were there on the ground indicates exactly the same thing.
Are you familiar with what happened to Mabel Jansen, who was a judge in South Africa? And
I'm sorry?
She was dealing with Malema's case when SARS took him to court over the taxation and stuff like that. And she said that he had to appear in court, and his lawyers didn't realize that she understands Zulu. And they said to each other in Zulu, this woman is not going to be a judge much longer. And then what happened was that someone who is a real left-wing person started claiming that Mabel was a racist, and all of a sudden, it was in the papers, and she was being hammered, and the other judges that she worked with said, "Look, Mabel, you better resign," and she did. She actually resigned, and this is all to do with her taking Malema to court, and the case against Malema was dropped. It never went anywhere, and the really disturbing thing is that during this time, while she was away from her home, there was a hit job done on her home, and they stole her computers and all the evidence and all that sort of stuff, and they saw the CCTV camera footage, and it was people dressed in army uniforms going in and basically breaking into her house.
Yeah, I think we need to understand that that Mr. Malema is a very influential political figure in the country, and with the things he sings and with the things that he says very often, I don't think people necessarily always want to believe the real impact that it has on people on ground level, and the influence that it has on a lot of people. I really think he has done a lot of things that has been detrimental to the progress or the possible success of different communities in the country.
Right. No, I totally agree. Now, Angie Mamoni has asked, do Afriforum recommend we stand and fight, or do we head for the hills?
Sure. That's a very broad question. Look, as I said earlier, I think we don't really have hills to head to. So I think the majority of people that are here are most likely here to stay. They don't really have anywhere else to go, and a lot of people simply don't have the money to leave the country. So from our side, once again, as I said earlier, we need to build sustainable ground level structures to build a sustainable future. And if it starts with something like fixing potholes or doing refuse removal, then so be it. But it's a start, and we need to start with the smaller things before we can start managing the bigger things. And something like neighborhood watches has caused for drastic decreases in crime in several areas, and where neighborhood watches, farm watches, and the police work hand in hand in combating crime. And we would like to encourage that. And if we can build those types of initiatives successfully on ground level, I don't think it would be necessary to run anywhere.
Right. Now we're getting through the questions. There have been quite a few, as you know. Stephen Nell has asked, please ask Ian his opinion on Zuid-Landers and on Contes Isizwe.
So I'm going to speak about the latter first. I think MK is something of the past. I always laugh when I see the new videos of the veterans organization, and it's shocking. They are the youngest veterans that I've seen in my entire life. I don't really think there's much left of them. I've heard a lot of rumors, and a lot of people say things of what MK are up to and so on, but I simply don't believe it, because there's no real evidence that shows that, and the people that I've spoken with that are involved in those organizations will also tell you that it's mostly just a bit of a show. When it comes to the first organization, it's not. I don't think we necessarily sit around the same table with certain things, but it's as I said earlier. I think it's important to consider the views of different organizations in the country, and possibly those different organizations can all give some sort of positive input for us to build something sustainable in the future.
Right. Okay, now Corbett has asked, why is Afriforum so poorly represented in the Eastern Cape?
A very interesting question. It's actually a fantastic question. It's not very often that people ask that. We are very well represented over the past few years, specifically in Port Elizabeth. Interestingly enough, in the Eastern Cape and parts of KwaZulu-Natal as well, it is as though some parts of communities don't want to build community structures. They don't want that volunteer type of structure. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if it's a certain political ideology, or whether it is an opinion that we need to wait for government to do it. I'm really not sure. We have done a lot of work in many parts of the Eastern Cape. I even spoke about that neighborhood/farm watch with the Taxi Association years ago, and we will obviously continue supporting in those areas as the need may arise.
Right. Stephen Veldhagen asked, does Ian know if the ANC are aligning themselves militarily with any other countries or groups? Have Aranya had any criminal breaches yet that Ian knows of?
Not according to me. According to me, they are. It is a pretty secure place, but I'm not filled in on every detail. But from the ANC side, I don't think they really have done something remarkable with regards to that. I also don't think that our military, unfortunately, well, it might be fortunately for the country's future, but I'm not sure they have the capacity to really mobilize forces with anyone at this stage. I know that the 3,000 soldiers that they deployed now, just before lockdown, put serious strain on the South African National Defence Forces logistics network, and that's why I'm quite doubtful about how they will deploy another 70,000 soldiers in the coming weeks. I'm not sure how they're going to do that. I'm also not sure how or where they will get the money to do that. Maybe that's the part where another country, like something like China, might help them with the cash to do it. But I'm not sure that they really have the capacity to do it successfully.
Right. Okay, we've got about a handful of questions still to go. Oh my gosh, they're still coming through. Devon has asked, has Ian ever done any military service?
Unfortunately not. A lot of training with regards to private security. I have a degree in police science as well, so a lot of focus from a private perspective. But as you would know, unfortunately we didn't have the privilege of something like conscription at my age. So no, unfortunately not.
Right. And Robin asks, what happened on the tour of the USA feedback?
You can also go to the website to see that, and you can Google a little bit more on Aaron's roots. He is the one that handled that specific tour. But once again, major successes in a lot of the people, or with a lot of the people that we spoke with. Incredible how the support has grown over the years from several institutions in different countries, not only the United States. And, obviously we would like to build on that in the future.
Right. Okay, Stephen Veldhagen again. He says, if EWC goes ahead and government arrive to confiscate a farm, and there is conflict between this farmer and the government, how would Afriforum respond in this case?
I think if we are at that point, I think courts of law might not necessarily be an option, but if it were, we would definitely exhaust those resources as well. And if the relevant steps were taken by the owner of that land to make sure that they've done everything possible and exhausted every possible remedy to their knowledge, then we can assist them. Our biggest challenge with it is that we very often get asked for help. For example, someone would say that someone's now occupying their land, and when we do some further investigation, we realize that they have silently allowed them to live there for up to 3 years or 5 years, and now suddenly someone extra has moved in, and now they have a problem with it, and they're saying that their land is being taken or occupied or grabbed. And that makes it a bit difficult for us. So we prefer to, in most cases, handle it on an urgent basis, do the necessary legal work, and then make sure that if someone has, built a structure on that specific piece of land, we have it removed with the necessary court papers that are served.
Right. Now, Margaret Temple has asked if Afriforum speaking up, or is Afriforum speaking up about whites being excluded from food parcels during the lockdown?
Sorry, Scott, can you repeat that one?
Sure. Is Afriforum speaking up about whites being excluded from food parcels during the lockdown?
Well, from our side, we're speaking about everyone that's being excluded. I don't think it's only whites. I think we've got a challenge with a lot of communities being excluded, and that we only see it being very selectively done by corrupt ANC officials, and then by just ill-informed government officials. So definitely, it's not our main focus. It would be more on Solidarity Helping Hand side, and they handle that type of issue. But yes, definitely. From Afriforum side, we have been very vocal on this challenge, and I think we're going to be increasingly vocal in the coming months.
Right. Now, Jill has asked, why don't Afriforum take the lead and unite all the minority movements? We need unity.
I think there have been a lot of discussions, and there are a lot of discussions. For now, Afriforum is probably the largest, or it is the largest civil rights group in South Africa, most likely Africa as well. And I think the way we've done things is really working. We like to think of ourselves as an 80% organization. So, you've got your extreme one side and your extreme other side here, and in between you've got a mixture of people that give you a very important representation of reality, and we need to try and follow that. For now, it's working very well, and as I've said, our structures have spoken for themselves. Just in terms of community safety, the growth that we've seen has been far more than any other organization, and we've invited several organizations to work with us, and we will continue doing so. Our biggest challenge is that we need to make sure we do so within the framework of the law, and that we don't make ourselves guilty of the actions or the wrongdoings that we often frown upon when it comes to the governing party.
Right. Now, this is Margaret Temple, has asked, also, what about setting up groups to start barter systems to get essential goods?
So it has. Do you mean during the lockdown specifically? I assume so.
Yeah, I assume so. Yeah.
Yeah. So it has happened in certain areas, and I think it will be developing as we go. I think with the way that a lot of people are quite unsure about what the coming regulations might mean and what might happen. It also puts a little bit of a delay on the relevant developments to take place.
Right. Lightning Jack. We should counter Malema's influence. If he's guilty, he should be held accountable. Will he be held accountable for VBS? There seems to be stacks of evidence, but will he be charged?
Yeah, so we're not working on the VBS case specifically, or not that I am aware of, but I can comment on some of the others. As you know, our private prosecution unit have been working on several cases where Malema is being implicated, and that process is going. And then from our side, with the firearm that he discharged at a gathering in the Eastern Cape, we will definitely put as much pressure as we can to make sure that the law takes its course.
Right. Okay, we've got 2 questions to go. You've done well. There must have been about 30 questions.
No problem.
Stephen Conradi Nell has asked, please ask Ian, will there be a civil war in South Africa?
I honestly, at the moment, I don't think so. I think a lot of people would like to say that there would be something like that. I think they want to hear us answer a question that way. But for now, I think we're going to have spots of unrest, and I think we're going to have certain areas where we really have bad unrest and civil unrest in the country, and we're going to have other areas of relevant peace. I think the disorganization in the country between different political parties and within several major political parties like the EFF and the ANC will cause for certain ground level organizations to try and create unrest in areas, but I don't think they are organized well enough to really do it properly on a national level. I might be wrong, but the evidence at hand and the current trends that we see regarding civil unrest in the country would indicate it that way. So we'll have to see. I think the worrying thing that we have seen, that is a bit of an African tendency that is happening, and we experienced it recently in Northwest in the Hartbeespoort area, specifically in the rural part, where informal settlements or township areas would start protesting and they would close the roads, and instead of then just stoning cars or whatever, they would open the road almost like a toll gate, and if you don't pay them, they then stone your car. So it's this real African style of doing things. I'm saying it in a very derogatory way. I don't mean to generalize in Africa, but the typical ground level corruption type of action that's starting to take place in certain areas would definitely be worrying too.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm just going to address people watching. Guys, we'll be shutting down this live stream in probably in about the next 10 minutes. So please, if you have any final questions, throw them in now. I just want to pose this question from Angie to you, Ian. It says, Afriforum are too tempered to create a resistance. They're playing it safe with the law. But what if the law breaks down?
I think it's a dangerous question. I think that when we look at the law as is at the moment, it's important that we don't make ourselves guilty of, as I said earlier, the wrongdoings of other people that we often like to blame for the challenges that we're facing in South Africa. To say that Afriforum is not tempered right, I wouldn't quite say that. But I wouldn't link an organization to any form of resistance at the moment. I think it's a very dangerous discussion to be had. I think if we're at that point in the country, I don't think we're going to be having live streams about these types of discussions. I think we're going to have other challenges at hand. So for us now, we're doing what we can within the framework of the law. And we've done very well with that, and we've had major successes in combating crime, major arrests being made, and it's working for us.
Right. Gordon has asked, which tribal group is most involved in farm attacks?
Sure. Very, very difficult question to answer. I can't say that it's one specific group. What I can say that it really does differ from region to region. Each region has its own farm attack dynamic, and it also might change over time. So in certain parts we might have had that, a lot of Mozambicans might have been involved in attacks, and that might have changed to Zimbabweans over time. And over time the gangs are a mixture of Mozambicans, Zimbabweans and South Africans. And we often see that too, that a gang that attacks a farm aren't simply from one area, they're a mixture of people.
Right. Now, the final question for you. Phew. Mike Simpson says, Scott, please ask Ian if he knows why has the SASSA WhatsApp apply for the Rand 350 help been stopped?
I think too many people sent them a WhatsApp. I think they might have started feeling like me with all the questions. No, I don't know, Scott. I can't answer that. I really don't know. Unfortunately, I would be lying if I were to answer that.
Right. Well, look, I just want to say, Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We've been waiting to have someone from Afriforum to come onto the live stream so that we can find out more about your organization and give it a bit of exposure. We've got about 90,000 subscribers between our two channels, so we do get a lot of people coming through, and a lot of people from overseas, although about 70% are in South Africa, people in South Africa, and that's stats I get from YouTube. What I'll do after our live stream is I'll actually send you the link, so if you want to put that up anywhere or send it to anybody, they can go and watch the discussion we had tonight. What I'd love you to do right now is just address people who are watching now or people who might watch later. Give them some sort of message, whatever that message is that you'd like to put out there.
Sure thing. No, Scott, just from my side, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I think it's important from our side that we don't just try to enforce one thought or one mindset when it comes to the challenges that we're facing in the country. I think it's crucial that we consider the many different options that we have, and I don't think it's, as I said, similar to farm attacks to just say that we've only got, that there's only one reason for it. It's the same principle. We need to make sure that we find sustainable solutions for the future. We don't really have an option to go north, and we definitely can't go south. So we're here to stay, and we need to do as much as we possibly can to build a sustainable future. And Afriforum, I think, is one of the successful models up to now that has proved itself over the years, and I think from our side we're really trying to start to take things to the next level now, where we've established basic structures in certain areas and we need to start creating depth in those structures. We also would like to, from my side, invite people to get involved in the existing structures, visit our website, check out all the great work that we've been doing, and we're very proud of everything that we've done, and we really encourage people to also get involved.
Fantastic. Okay, finally, guys, I'd like to just give a huge shout out to the moderators who've been looking after the side chat and taking questions and pasting them when I had the moment to look at them. Thank you guys for participating, those who are watching the live stream right now, those who've actually put messages in the side chat as well. I've had a blast. I've really enjoyed finding out more information, and there's no better way by actually speaking to the person involved in that particular area. So to our guest, Ian, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your discussion with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you, and thank you for everyone, and thanks for all the questions. It was a privilege to be able to answer them.
Fantastic. All right, guys. As always, please take care, be safe, and don't forget, tomorrow night we have another live stream. And we're going to be speaking to Tian Teron, who's actually a farmer. And he's going to be talking to us about the situation on the farm. Okay. Good night, guys. I will see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m.